Hello everyone, welcome back to Local Cryptid. Today we are going to look at the case of Issei Sagawa. I have received some requests for this and you all seem to like the videos that I have made about cannibals in the past. So here I am making another video about a cannibal for you all. This particular case is extremely frustrating and very sad, quite frankly, because not only did he, murder someone and cannibalize them, he also walks free. He's still alive, he's walking free today, and he basically was famous for what he did. So definitely stick around if you're interested in hearing his story. And before we jump into our case today, don't forget to hit that subscription button down below to be alerted every single time I post a new video. Issei Sagawa was born April 26, 1949 in Kobe, Japan, to a wealthy family. His father was the president of Kurita Water Industries, and his mother was a stay-at-home mom. His family had influence in Kobe because his grandfather was an editor for the city's newspaper. Issei was born prematurely and was small enough to fit into the palm of his father's hand, and he developed enteritis, which is inflammation of the small intestine. Issei recovered but continued to have fragile health, and the Sagawas had another son a few years later named Jun. Because of his health conditions, Issei was an introvert and he developed a strong interest in literature. He did very well in school, but it was when he was in first grade, so around 7 years old, that he experienced his first cannibalistic desire. He saw a classmate's thigh and the desire to consume flesh only grew from there. In 2011, Issei told Vice that his tendencies grew from there, and he practiced bestiality with the family's dog, and he began to have cannibalistic desires for the young female students in his classroom. And speaking of this Vice interview, I watched it. It's very disturbing. It's quite old, so I'm sure some of you have seen it as well. It's like about 11 years old now, and it is very weird. Like, he tries to make you feel bad for him. It's very uncomfortable to watch, and just like content warning if you haven't watched it yet and maybe you want to watch it after this video. It definitely has some extremely graphic images and they just pop up out of nowhere, so keep that in mind. Images that I don't really think that the general public should see. They were leaked out, so just letting you know they're all in there. And it is very upsetting because he does make it seem like you should feel sorry for him in this interview when really he did something horrible to somebody else. So it's very weird and it's just very uncomfortable to watch, but it is still on YouTube. When Issei grew up, he attended college and completed a master's degree in English at the age of 24. And he was attending Waco University in Tokyo, and one night he broke into a young woman's apartment after following her home. His intention was to cannibalize her without killing her, but she woke up and knocked him to the ground. The police were called and Issei was charged with rape, but the charges were dropped because his father paid a settlement to the victim. And in 1977, Issei moved to France to pursue a PhD in literature at the Sorbonne University. He was 27 years old at this point. He began to solicit prostitutes almost every night and made attempts to shoot them, but he claims his fingers froze and he couldn't pull the trigger. While he was in school, he met Renee Hartvelt, who was a Dutch student that was in his classes. And Renee and Issei were friends. They studied together and Renee would help him with his English to better his studies in his PhD program. On June 11, 1981, Issei invited Renee to dinner at his apartment so she could translate poetry for his school assignment. Once Renee arrived at his apartment, she sat at a desk and was reading off the poetry for Issei to listen to, and she was working on translating it for him. And while she was reading, Issei was standing behind her with a rifle, and he ended up shooting her in the neck and killing her. And Issei claims that at this point he fainted due to shock and shortly woke up after. Issei then woke up and wanted to fulfill his dream, wanted to fulfill this fantasy that he had. So he attempted to eat Renee, but he could not bite through her skin. So he ended up digging around through his kitchen looking for a sharp knife, and he ended up leaving the apartment and going out to buy a butcher knife and then coming back home. And his reasoning for picking Renee specifically, because they cultivated this friendship. They were friends for quite a while before he actually decided to kill her. And he decided that he felt that Renee was beautiful, that she was smart, and he wanted to basically absorb her beauty and her energy, because he always felt unattractive and he was very short and he always felt very weak due to his health conditions. So he wanted to absorb Renee's like beautiful energy, and he felt he could do that through eating her. So over the following days, Issei partook in necrophilic acts with Renee's corpse, and then he began to eat her. He cut off like her breasts and parts of her face and other parts of her body and consumed them, sometimes raw, sometimes cooked. And then he was taking pictures of her body throughout the process. And again, in like the Vice interview, a lot of these pictures have been leaked later on down the line through like book publishers and things like that. So they are available online, but I definitely don't recommend like looking them up. They're very graphic and highly disturbing, and I just saw one and I was like, okay, that's enough. I don't need to look at that. But it's very like extremely graphic, but he basically just like mutilated her body over the following days. He then decided that he had to get rid of the body once flies were forming, and so he then dismembered her body in certain parts. Like, he didn't take her entire body apart, but he took some parts of her body and was putting it in suitcases, and he was planning on doing this over the course of like several days. Issei made an attempt to put 2 separate suitcases with partial remains from Renee in the Bois du Boulogne lake. He was caught in the act and arrested by the French police. Issei's father hired a lawyer for his defense, and Issei was held in prison for 2 years. He was found legally insane and unfit to stand trial by the French court system. He was ordered to be held indefinitely in a mental institution. And he wrote Issei's account of the murder and published the book in Japan under the title In the Fog. The French court system deported Issei to Japan, where he was committed to another mental institution in Tokyo. He was examined by psychologists that declared him sane and found that his sexual perversion was sole motivation for the murder. Because the charges were dropped due to the French court system finding him insane, and all of their documents were sealed and not released to Japanese authorities, Issei could not be legally detained in Japan. So he checked himself out of the hospital on August 12, 1986, and has remained free to this day. Although many people to this day are still upset that Issei is free and walking around, he became like a minor celebrity in Japan. He was invited to speak on shows and talk about his crime. There were several books and graphic novels written about his murder. He also came out with a comic book and a book about what he had done, basically through his account. So there's like several written works about what he did. And he was also invited to a couple different adult films, one where it was like filmed live, I believe, and the lady that was there with him did not know that he committed this crime, and after they had already partook in adult activities, Issei told her what happened, and basically she was very upset, and apparently they're still friends. Like, they were friends after this, but I still find that really wrong that the people who were like making that film didn't tell her, and I think that that's so wrong and that's absolutely horrible. But he was, invited to be in several films. There is also a movie, like a documentary style movie made about this. Obviously, like I said, he was interviewed on Vice, and so he basically is like a celebrity for what he did, and it feels like it's almost like celebrated, because there's a lot of pictures of him online where he is like at parties having a good time and drinking and kind of enjoying himself. So it seems very like wrong. I felt very like a weird feeling looking at these pictures, because it's, again, it feels like almost celebrated that he did this, and he should really be in prison and he shouldn't be able to be out in public, because that seems very dangerous. And luckily, Issei can no longer find publishers for his books, because when he released his own like actual book about it, it's like a comic book series, a lot of backlash came from the public. People were very upset that he was able to come out with this and that an artist was willing to like work with him to draw images of his crime. And so there was, a lot of backlash and people were really upset. So now he's not able to really publish works anymore. I don't know if that will change from the time of me making this video, but he has had trouble in the last around like 10 years or so coming out with new works. In 2005, Issei's parents passed away and he was prevented from attending the funeral. He was then forced to move into public housing, where he received welfare benefits for a short while. And Issei's celebrity status has definitely slowed down over the years. I think that when it first happened, it was like a big shock value kind of thing, and now it's somewhat like waned down and people aren't, making such a big deal about him anymore. And he is like sick, which we will talk about in a moment, but I do feel like he really now like struggles with finding employment, and he struggles with having money because of his parents passing away. Like I said, his parents were very wealthy, and so then he doesn't have money from that anymore. He's not able to live with them anymore, and he is mostly now taken care of by his brother June, who basically cares for him. In 2013, Issei was hospitalized from a cerebral infraction which permanently damaged his nervous system. He now lives alone but receives assistance from his younger brother. So what do you all think about this case? I find it so frustrating to read about cannibals and talk about them, because it just seems like they just get away with it for so long because they're getting rid of the evidence a lot easier, and it's really hard. I just find them really like disgusting and like the absolute worst type of people. And Issei is so scary because he's like out in the world, and he, said he wants to partake in being a cannibal again before he dies. And he is, a lot older now, so I'm assuming somebody would have to help him. And I believe he is like in a wheelchair now. But that doesn't mean that someone will help him or someone would volunteer to do it, because sometimes people do crazy stuff like that. So I could absolutely see somebody volunteering, just like, people sending photographs to like Richard Ramirez and wanting to be with him. So I definitely feel like that could potentially happen, and I absolutely hope it doesn't, because it's just disgusting and so sad what he did to Renee. And it feels really wrong because her family never got any closure. And Renee actually wrote letters to her family back at home because she was excited to have a friend at school. Of course, she was from another country as well, and so she would like write back to her family and, say, I met this man from school, we're good friends, and then, he kills her. So I just find that really disgusting and gross. So let me know what you all think about this case, if you've heard of him, what you think about it. And yeah, otherwise I don't know. This case is really gross to me. I was really grossed out reading it the whole time when I was reading about it. So yeah, let me know what you guys think below. And if there are any other cases you would like me to cover in the near future, please let me know down below in the comments. I always look forward to you all giving me suggestions. So otherwise, guys, stay safe out there and have a great day. Bye-bye.